Hey folks, Ariel over here at Nyth, where today we want to talk a little bit about how the gardening year went and what's happening right now. If you're new, welcome to the channel. I live off-grid in a tiny house, which is right over there. This is Burley wearing his I'm Not an Elk scarf, and it is, what are we here? Toward the last week in September now. This is definitely fall here. People ask, when do the trees start to change colors and stuff here? Well, about all the color you can see from my house, you can probably see behind me there and kind of the brush edge. Some of the berry bushes get leaves that are a little yellow, and there are aspen trees and cottonwood trees in the area. Those both get very yellow. I can see some aspen trees kind of distantly from my clearing here. I can't really see cottonwoods from right here very well. They grow in the river bottoms. But everything right around my clearing is evergreens, various kinds of conifer pine trees. So nothing else really changes colors here. But in the whole area, yes, the trees that do change all go yellow, and then the leaves fall off, and they're probably at their peak maybe a day or so ago, and the leaves are starting to drop now. And of course there's a few spots where they're still turning, but it's definitely fall or autumn here. And as you can probably see behind me, there are quite a few holes in the garden now because the things are done. And I'm sure somebody's going to suggest, why don't you try winter gardening? Yes, I've addressed this before multiple times. Winter gardening and all the ways people do that, that's how I grow things in the summer here, because I live in a climate where there is officially no frost-free growing zone in the summer. It's been freezing hard every night now for maybe about 2 weeks, snowing in the mountains above me most days. I know it looks nice and warm and sunny down here while I get sun and shade from the trees. There's more snow in the forecast this weekend. Maybe by the next few days I'll have a video of it actually being white here. I don't know if it'll end up just being flurries or if it'll get cold enough to stick. But there are definitely some crops that can survive that kind of weather, especially if protected and the right things are planted. But then as far as actual winter gardening, with 450 inches of snowfall here, there's just no kind of structure that keeps the ground clear, short of something built like my house, that can support that. So my winter gardening happens in the summer. But as far as the whole gardening year, there's lots of bare spots here, as you probably would be aware if you've been watching, because you've seen us harvest potatoes and onions and garlic and forget what all else I did videos on. But a lot of those things are done now, either because the natural life cycle of the plant has finished, like an onion or garlic. They're just done because they're done. They would have been done even if it was still warm and no snow on the way. Or because there were things like my peas and beans, which were still blooming prolifically and would have continued to produce longer had it stayed warm, but it did not stay warm. They froze. So I pulled the plants out, put them in the compost bin. But they would have continued to produce had it not froze. So some things are done because they died naturally, and some were killed traumatically due to the weather. So that's what all the empty holes are everywhere now. And left, I still have a lot of greens, chard and kale and stuff. That'll be fine till it's like 10 degrees out, and I can even still pick it with some snow on it. Still have a little bit of lettuce, cabbages, the strawberry beds behind me, and some carrots and beets and such that are still in the ground that need to come out in the very near future here before the ground actually freezes solid. So with all of that, I get questions about, is it actually worth gardening when I live in a place where technically you're not supposedly able to garden because there's no such thing as a last frost date and a first frost date and a gap in between where you can't expect to get a freeze. I did get 6 weeks this summer with no frost in it. That is much longer than normal. I've had summers where there was a frost on average once every 7 days, you know, and not just a frost, often a hard freeze, like, you know, 27, 26 degrees, something like that, or even colder. So I get questions about, is it worth it? You spend all this, you know, time and energy and stuff to garden, and is it really worth it? It would be easier to just skip the whole thing and go to the grocery store. So there's a few things you have to factor in. I love gardening. It just makes me happy. Even if it didn't produce a single thing I could eat and I only was growing ornamental stuff, I would probably garden. Just because it makes me happy. It's good for your health, getting your fingers in the soil, get those little microbes into your body, improve your microbiome health, all of that. I would garden just for that. So yes, for me it's worth it, even if I'm just measuring that. But as far as the actual amount of food produced, I kind of wanted to look at that a little bit. I made myself a little checklist here because I knew I'd forget what all I'd been growing. So I could go to the grocery store and get some of these things. Some would probably break even on cost because like I did buy my cabbage plants from a little local greenhouse because I don't have room and enough light in my house to get them started early enough to get a good head. So I bought the little plants, and yes, you can buy a cabbage fairly inexpensively at the grocery store. So there are some things like that would probably break even whether I just bought them or grew them myself. It is still worth it for those things for me to grow my own because I know what is in there. The flavor is better, the color is better. Like, go look at the broccoli video I did. I think that's a good example. That broccoli is a whole different shade of green than anything you can get in a grocery store. And that is affected by the nutrients in the soil. And we're going to very shortly I know some of this ground is bare right now. I just was pulling dead stuff out like in the last day or so. We're going to cover this up. Ground doesn't like to be bare, and we're going to do a video on that. But at the moment it's bare. Anyway, it has to do with how you feed your soil and take care of all the little critters living in your soil and so on. So even if it breaks even, I would still do it. So there's two reasons I garden. And then a lot of things, it actually produces a lot. Sorry, got interrupted by a phone call for a minute. If you notice the video jump, that's what happened. Anyway, so to try to answer that question, I did make a list of the things that I actually grew and approximate amounts I produced. These are slightly estimates this year. If I get around to taking the time, next year I think it would just be fun to do an actual weigh everything that I take out of the garden to eat, and at the end of the year have like a total amount of pounds of each kind of produce and a total amount of I produced this many total pounds of food out of my gardening efforts this year. I don't have that this year, so some of these things were specific measurements, like I weighed all of the I didn't weigh all of the onions at once because I'd been eating some, but these are close guesstimates, let's say, on what I grew this year. So off my list here, grew about 10 pounds of rhubarb, used it to make various desserts and sauces, about 50 pounds of onions, about 40 pounds of them are currently curing, and the rest I've eaten fresh, and there's a little handful still over there that I will pull and eat fresh. Garlic, it was about 200 heads. When I weighed it, it was about 10 pounds of garlic. And again, I've been using some, so that's not exact. Potatoes, I had right at 100 pounds when I dug all the rest of the potatoes. Plus I'd used a few for meals, before digging the bulk of them. Strawberries, I got about 2 quarts. I don't have a very big strawberry patch. That was just enough to have some fresh strawberries. Raspberries, I only got a handful. My raspberry patch is still kind of getting established, and I only got a few berries this year. Hopefully there'll be a lot more next year. Cabbage, I've got about 20 heads over there. I've eaten a few. I've got some more to harvest. Broccoli, probably had close to 5 gallons. My little broccoli plants over there are still producing away on those little side shoots, the secondary ones. Every couple weeks I cut another bag of them to eat, so that's been really great. Cauliflower, maybe like 2 gallons, because often if I can't use things right away, I put them in a gallon Ziploc to keep things kind of crispy. I don't know if I'll plant cauliflower next year because my broccoli is much more productive because of the 2nd and 3rd and 7th and 8th and whichever crop number I'm on yet at this point of the broccoli, and the cauliflower doesn't do that, though I really enjoy good cauliflower. Lettuces, I think I've filled up at least 10 different gallon bags of my lettuce mix, which you can probably still see some of behind me there. There's getting to be some gaps in there. A lot of that stuff I cut and come again all summer long, and I will continue to do that till it'll freeze before my kales and stuff here. But I got a lot of lettuce, and lettuce is one of the most expensive things to go buy by the pound in the grocery store. Beets, I don't know for sure yet. I've eaten some. A lot of them are still in the ground, so I'm not sure what I've got there, but at least several gallons. Carrots, again, I've eaten actually quite a few, but I still have a lot in the ground, so I'm not sure. But looking at it and based on other years, I probably have close to 10 gallons of carrots this year. Beans, I probably had about 2 gallons before the plants froze, and again, my plants would have kept producing had they not froze. And peas, about 1 gallon. As you probably know, my peas didn't do well this year. Next year, that should be better. Chard and kale, I don't even know how to measure it. I don't really put it in bags. I don't really weigh it by the pound. All that I can eat, let's say that. All that I can eat, and have given a few bunches away to various friends who like it, and I will continue to pick this probably even after the snow is sitting on it. And then small amounts of things like strawberry spinach, leeks, kohlrabi, various herbs and teas. You guys have seen me do videos on that, of all the kinds of herbs I can grow. I grow enough to use fresh all summer and to provide me pretty much all of the dried that I use through the rest of the year until I have more fresh growing. So I think that's pretty much the stuff that I grew this year. Oh, Brussels sprouts, they're still growing over there. They're the very last thing I harvest out of the garden, so I'm not sure how many of them I've got. But overall, that's a lot of pounds of food. So in answer to the original question, is it worth the effort to try to garden here? Yes, it is for me. Both because I love to do it, period, because even if it was a break even on financial cost, it would be worth it to me because I know what's going into my food, and then I do actually produce a lot of very high quality food. And I eat the vast majority of it fresh, and we've seen a few of the things that I get. A few of the things that get, you know, enough volume of, I preserve as well to eat through the winter. And I'll probably do a video on where I store food inside because I get that question all of the time. But that's the answer to is it worth it for me. So maybe that encourages some of you guys if you're trying to figure out what you can produce. That's what I'm able to grow here in my winter garden in the summer with no official growing season. And yes, it does take some work. I do water because I live in a very dry climate. I have videos on that. I do use my frost covers, which I actually just pulled out of here to kind of tidy up for the winter, because none of the stuff that's left when this freezes, things are really done. So I'm no longer worried about protecting the kale. So that takes some work. So it is effort, but I do think it is completely worth it. So maybe that's helpful if you're doing some considerations. If you're somewhere warmer, you probably don't have to worry about protecting from frost. You probably have to deal with more bugs and stuff because they don't freeze every couple weeks and kill most of them. So there's different challenges in different places. But that's about what I was able to produce this year. Yes, the new beds with the hardware cloth underneath and the concrete block or cement block seems to have completely stopped the gophers in here. For all those who are worried about the gopher health, I don't have very kindly feelings towards little things that have cost me hundreds and hundreds of dollars, but they are happily still munching through my flowers and my herbs and the yard and everything else, so no worries. They're still very much alive. No efforts to get rid of them have ever been successful, but these blocks have stopped them from taking all of my food, so I've gotten to eat most of it this year, which is lovely. So that's an answer to, is it worth trying to garden here? So even if you don't have a space this big, and just for reference guys, if you've watched videos around here, this whole clearing, if I go from basically everything that's inside the fence, there's a fence up to keep the bigger critters out and you can't see it, it's hiding back there in the trees. Everything inside the fence is about 1/3 of an acre. So depending where you are, that may be a very large amount of space or a very small one. But in that, I have a yard, I have the house, I have all of my many flower beds, I have the wood pile, I have the fire pit, I have my huge herb and flower garden, I have this garden, and I still have wild space and edges all around. So that's what I'm able to do in that amount of space. And I actually have measured the square footage and done like the math and divided it. And it's kind of a rectangle that's not perfectly rectangular, but when you add up the square footage and multiply, it's about 1/3 of an acre. So that's what I'm able to do there. So even if you got rid of, oh boy, 2/3 of it, you could get rid of 1/3 and I wouldn't have to move any of my garden or you know, flowers or herbs. I would just lose some of the yard and some of that space. And I could cram things into probably into half that space, like 1/6 of an acre, and still grow this volume in a place with no growing season, just to give you an idea of what you may be able to do in a warmer place. And even if you guys only have a patio, at least grow your herbs. They're so nutritious, and they're rather expensive to buy high quality ones, and a lot of herbs are things that grow very, very well in a pot sitting on your porch, or even sitting on a windowsill or a balcony if that's all you have. So anyway, hopefully that answers your questions. If you got something else you want to know about, is gardening worth it here, ask down below. Thanks for watching. Hi folks, Ariel over here. Thanks for spending some of your valuable time watching these videos. Hopefully you found something beautiful, educational, interesting, peaceful, relaxing, or useful while you are here. If so, find more videos here, subscribe so you don't miss any updates, and if you like what you found here, feel free to like and share away so that others can benefit as well. You all have a wonderful day.